Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Before we get started, I would just like to acknowledge that FRC is located on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji Cree, Dakota, and the Dene peoples, which is also the homeland of the Métis Nation.
Hello FRC, welcome to your Remembrance Day ceremony. Across Canada and in many other countries, people gather on November 11th to honor the courage and devotion of the brave men and women who have made the supreme sacrifice of giving their lives for our country. The hostilities of the First World War ceased on November 11th, 1918 at 11 a.m., the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. The following year marked the first observance of a day to remember and honor those who died, as well as to give thanks for the sacrifices of those who came back from serving their country. Since then, Canadians have fought in other conflicts, and many have given their lives so that we might enjoy freedom today. They too should be remembered. November 11th, Remembrance Day, is the day Canadians remember the brave men and women who have served and continue to serve our country during times of war, conflict, and peace. Specifically, the First and Second World Wars, the Korean War, and all of the conflicts since then in which members of the Canadian Forces have participated to give us and others freedom. They died so we could have the freedom. They died so we can get an education. They gave their lives so we can get a job, so we can live a free life. We are forever in their debt. As we stand here in peace and safety, we pay our respects to all of the fallen, all of the wounded, and all who have served in conflicts over the last 100 years. Today, as we should every day, remember those who volunteered, sacrificed, served, fought, and died for our freedom. We thank you and we salute you, as we salute those who have made the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom. We will never forget. We will remember you. Now, let's look at the first video of the ceremony from the Canadian Armed Forces.
It's 1916. 800 young Newfoundlanders head towards the front line. They fight bravely through barbed wires and a firestorm. The next morning, only 68 answer the roll call. A community loses a generation.
That same year, hundreds of Black Canadians come together as members of the No. 2 Construction Battalion. Many had been denied the opportunity to fight for their country because of the color of their skin, but they refuse to take no for an answer. Even then, they are only allowed to be part of a segregated, non-combatant unit. After the war is done, they do not receive the full recognition they deserve until a century later. A country is denied its heroes.
It's 1951 in the heat of the Korean War. Canadian forces are under attack. Noel Knockwood, a residential school survivor from the Sabaganagati First Nation, fires his 105mm howitzer against the enemy. He's only 18 years old, and he serves in Korea for 413 days. He comes home and begins his lifelong work to promote and protect Mi'kmaq heritage and spirituality. A community gains a pillar.
It's 1956, and conflict has escalated between Egypt, France, the United Kingdom, and Israel over the Suez Canal. With the region in crisis, the United Nations calls for a ceasefire and withdrawal of foreign forces. They create the first United Nations emergency force. It is led by a Canadian peacekeeper named Tommy Burns. A country gains a new part of its identity.
Our history is not just dates and key battles. It is not just victories and defeats. Our history is people. It is their duty, honor, integrity, and courage. It is the people who came home forever changed by the grim realities of war. It is the ones who made the ultimate sacrifice in the pursuit of a better world, a world where everyone can be free, a world that follows the rule of law and upholds human rights, a world where all people are treated with dignity and respect.
This Veterans Week, we remember the sailors patrolling the perilous seas, navigating bravely despite the danger of hidden German U-boats. We remember the soldiers crawling through the mud, bracing enemy fire. We remember the aviators flying out into the night, dodging enemy spotters and hoping that their planes would make it through. We remember the nurses saving lives while putting their own on the line. We remember the people on the home front making munitions and ensuring that our forces overseas had the supplies they needed to stay alive.
In countries like Ukraine, Iraq, and Lebanon, Canada supports local security forces. We help them develop the skills they need to build and maintain long-term peace and stability. Canadians are also supporting United Nations peacekeeping operations. That includes flying people, equipment, and supplies where they are needed for UN operations in Africa.
Here at home, you may have seen military members right in your community. They are there helping out with floods, fires, ice storms, and COVID-19. No matter what happens, their job is to work hard to keep you and your community safe. Maybe you've seen helicopters or planes flying overhead, or if you walk past the massive steel-hulled ship docked at the ports. Or the highway, you've passed by some big green trucks driving all together. Maybe you have someone in your family who is in the military, or your neighbor is a veteran.
We all have different connections to Veterans Week, and we have different ways of showing our gratitude. A wreath-laying ceremony, reciting a poem, wearing a poppy, listening to a podcast, calling up a relative, and asking to hear their stories.
I want to thank you for taking the time to be part of this Veterans Week event. Thank you for remembering their stories and their sacrifices. Together, we celebrate the lives of those who made it home, who survived to have families and to grow old. And we honor those who did not. We remember the thousands of people, past and present, who put their lives on the line in defense of our country, our people, and our values, lest we forget.
The Wind Ensemble will be performing October by Eric Whitaker. This piece is a piece for reflection. During this piece, we invite you to take some time and think of the sacrifices made by soldiers to protect their country. As the seasons changed and time passes, soldiers stayed focused on the goal at hand, working to protect and serve. However, the price they paid was heavy, leaving their families behind, being so uncertain for the future, and in many cases, losing their lives. These are incredible sacrifices that we must take time to acknowledge.
The laying of the wreaths is a significant practice during Remembrance Day services. The wreaths are used to pay respects and lay tributes to individuals or groups. We will now have a laying of the wreath ceremony performed by a few cadets.
Squad attention. Squad oval dressing right. Dress. Squad eyes front. Squad weather center quick. March. Squad halt. Squad right. Turn. Squad cut. March.
As we today work to try to understand exactly what the soldiers endured in times of war, it is important to hear their stories and to experience music that was written to help us with this understanding. The piece, Letters from Home, Songs of War and Love by Peter Meechan is written with this exact goal in mind. While specifically concerned with the First World War, each of the work's movements broadly outlines emotions that would form part of any soldier's lives in any war. The first movement you will hear, The Trench, takes us to the battlefield. It combines bravado in the percussion opening with the whole band coming together as one, as a unit, before again we hear fear and trepidation in the brass, once more failing to reach a resolution. Perhaps the thoughts of the soldiers are interrupted as the percussion once more calls the men to arms. The movement ends with gunshots in the percussion. The second movement you will hear, In Memory, opens with a love song, before a slow lament, again never resolving, is heard. It keeps finding a new key, a new place, intending to represent the cyclical nature of war, and again without resolution, suggesting that war is often that way.
Since I last wrote to you, we were in a charge, and it was awful. We started out the night before and marched 13 miles. We arrived at the place about 1:30 in the morning so that we were put into an old trench and told to await orders, so you can have an idea that our nerves were strung to the highest pitch. So the Germans started to rain shells into us, but then our artillery opened fire on the German trenches. The row was awful. The whole sky was just in one great blaze with bursting shells. Sharp at 3 o'clock, the order came down our lines to fix bayonets and to load our rifles, and 10 minutes later, down came the order to charge, so we rushed over the trench, but a good few of our boys fell into the parapet as the Germans had their machine guns trained on us, but on we went, and as one fell, another took its place. We arrived at the German trench, and when it came to the steel, they could not match us, and I am proud to say that I put a few out with the bayonet myself. Although one does not think of it at the time, one does think of it after the excitement is over. We took over 200 prisoners and a couple of machine guns. I sent home a German sword. But we were not satisfied with one trench. We went on and took 2 more lines of them. They shelled us the whole day after we took them, and they eventually sent loads of gas, but we stuck on for what we had so dearly won. I was to be recommended for the DCM, Distinguished Conduct Medal, for for fetching in wounded under fire, but the officer that took my name was killed shortly afterwards, and I do not know how it will go now, but I was promoted on the field by our own officer to corporal. I was buried 3 times by shells and had to be dug out, and I got in a slight bullet wound in the thigh, but I am out of the hospital again and expect to go into action in a couple days' time.
May 14th, 1917. 5928 Point Ellis, 2nd Canadians. It is with much sorrow I am writing to you to tell you of the death of your husband. He was admitted here very severely wounded in his chest on the 3rd of May 1917. He died. He at first did very well, and we had great hopes of his recovery. He got suddenly very much worse, became unconscious, and died shortly after. He was always talking about you and his little one and hoping to get home to you. We all feel so sorry for you. Your husband was a great favorite with the interns and orderlies. He will be buried at Albany and will lie with many other brave men who, like him, have given their all for others. His grave will be marked by a cross with his name. Please accept my very deep sympathy in your great trouble. With much sympathy, yours truly, Lieutenant C. J.R. Harwell.
Created in Ontario, Highway of Heroes is a patriotic tradition where we commemorate the sacrifices made by the fallen soldiers who died in Afghanistan. It honors those who risked their lives and it ensures their memory is never forgotten. Here is Highway of Heroes.
The day I shipped out, they numbered a dozen. Upon my return, we're 100 or so. From the coast and from the prairies, I bet they keep coming. Add one more name from Ontario and carry me home down the highway of heroes. People above with the flags flying low. Carry me softly down the highway of heroes. True patriot love, there was never more. I served with distinction, no visions of glory. I served without question, of personal gain. Seek no justification, it's not part of my story, and it offers no comfort to the ones who remain. Just carry me home down the highway of heroes. People above, with the flags flying low. Carry me softly down the highway of heroes. True patriot love, there was never more. Took up my vocation, I was called by my nation without hesitation. My answer I gave. Now I'm not wondering the things that I might have been, are no consolation to the forgotten brave. So carry me home down the highway of heroes. People above with the flags flying low. Carry me softly down the highway of heroes. True patriot love, there was never more. Carry me home down the highway of heroes. People I love with their hands on low. And carry me softly down the highway of heroes. True patriot love, there was never more. 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 There was never more.
First published and played in the 1790s, the last post was one of the many bugle calls by the British Army. This bugle call was signaled to indicate that the last sentry post had been inspected. now observe the 2 minutes of silence. During this time of reflection, we pause to honor, thank, and remember those who have fallen.
Performed by Vox Anima Chamber Choir, Grace Before Sleep. This poem, written by Sarah Teasdale and music by S. Labar, is set as a prayer of deep gratitude for loved ones who surround us and bring us peace.
Ah.